J.J. Abrams' Star Trek almost had Kirk and Uhura swap starships. Star Trek 2009, SLT. Nyota Uhura, Zoe Saldana, and Captain James T. Kirk, Chris Pine, on an altered career trajectory where they almost end up switching starships. Director J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot successfully recast the iconic characters from Star Trek, the original series, with younger actors. Set in the alternate Kelvin timeline, Star Trek 2009's characters lived different lives than in Star Trek's Prime timeline, including how they all met and became the crew of the USS Enterprise. Star Trek 2009's Kelvin timeline was created by Nero, Eric Bana, a Romulan time traveler seeking revenge on Ambassador Spock, Leonard Nimoy, and the United Federation of Planets. Nero implemented his plan to annihilate the Federation in 2258, destroying a Klingon moon and Armada with his massive 24th century starship, the Narada. While a cadet at Starfleet Academy, Uhura decoded a Klingon distress call. During James T. Kirk's hearing for cheating on the Kobayashi Maru no-win scenario, Starfleet was mobilized to defend Vulcan from Nero's attack. Kirk and Uhura almost swapped starships in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009. Starfleet Academy placed its cadets on active duty to intercept Nero and protect Vulcan and assign the trainees to various starships. While Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, Carl Urban, helped James T. Kirk stow away aboard the Federation's newly built flagship, the USS Enterprise, Nyota Uhura was incensed when she found out Commander Spock, Zachary Quinto, assigned her to the USS Farragut. As Uhura and Spock were in a romantic relationship, the Vulcan acquiesced Nyota when she demanded to be assigned to the Enterprise. In Star Trek's Prime timeline, it's James T. Kirk who serves on the USS Farragut before he becomes captain of the Enterprise. Kirk was a lieutenant on the Farragut and rose up to become first officer. In Star Trek 2009, neither Kirk nor Uhura serve aboard the Farragut. Ironically, Uhura's insistence on being assigned to the USS Enterprise saved her life. The Farragut and the rest of Starfleet's Armada was destroyed by Nero. The Enterprise was only spared because it arrived late, but this good fortune kept Captain Christopher Pike, Bruce Greenwood, and his crew alive. Star Trek, the original series, never depicted how the crew of the Starship Enterprise came together, and J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009 served as the ersatz origin of the Enterprise crew in both the Prime and Kelvin realities. However, Star Trek Strange New Worlds is a prequel set in Star Trek's Prime timeline and reveals how the future crew commanded by Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, gradually assembled. It turns out Nyota Uhura, Celia Rose Gooding, was a Starfleet cadet when she was assigned to the Enterprise under Captain Pike, Anson Mount. Meanwhile, Lt. James T. Kirk was serving on the USS Farragut and became first officer in Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2. Kirk meets Uhura when he beams aboard the Enterprise to learn from Lt. Commander Una Chin Riley, Rebecca Romijn, Captain Pike's first officer. After helping Uhura and becoming her friend, Nyota introduced Kirk to Lt. Spock, Ethan Peck. Star Trek Strange New Worlds history between Kirk and Uhura begins quite differently than in Star Trek 2009, but they become united aboard the Starship Enterprise in both timelines. In J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek reboot, audiences were introduced to a fresh take on the iconic characters of the franchise, blending classic elements with bold reimaginings. Chris Pine's James T. Kirk and Zoe Saldana's Nyota Uhura stood out as key members of the newly formed crew of the USS Enterprise, offering updated portrayals that brought depth and nuance to their familiar roles. However, behind the scenes, a fascinating possibility nearly altered the course of their fates. In an early version of the script, Abrams and his creative team considered an intriguing twist. Kirk and Uhura would swap starships, resulting in a dramatically different storyline. The idea of Kirk and Uhura swapping ships raises many intriguing questions about the dynamics of the film and the direction of the rebooted series. As it stands in the final version, Kirk's journey from rebellious cadet to captain of the Enterprise is central to his character arc, while Uhura plays a more grounded, steady role on the ship. But what if those roles had been reversed? What if Kirk had found himself aboard a different starship, while Uhura took a more direct leadership role aboard the Enterprise. The potential shift in dynamics could have reshaped not only the relationship between these characters, but also the overall narrative and tone of the film. To understand how this alternate plotline might have unfolded, it's worth exploring where each character stood in the reboot's timeline. When we first meet Kirk in Abrams' Star Trek, he is a reckless and impulsive young man, a genius marred by his rebellious streak. His recruitment into Starfleet is more an act of defiance than of duty. He is destined for greatness, but his journey is one of personal growth and overcoming self-doubt. On the other hand, Uhura is portrayed as highly competent and composed from the outset. She is a skilled communications officer who commands respect, and her professionalism contrasts with Kirk's erratic behavior. In the final version of the film, Kirk's journey takes him from being disciplined and sidelined aboard the USS Enterprise to ultimately becoming its captain, thanks to his instinctive leadership and quick thinking. His brashness is tempered by his growing sense of responsibility, and the bond he forms with Spock, Uhura, and the rest of the crew solidifies his place as the Enterprise's rightful captain. Meanwhile, Uhura's key role as the voice of reason and her emotional connection with Spock helps anchor the story's more action-packed moments, making her an essential part of the team. However, if the filmmakers had gone ahead with the idea of Kirk and Uhura switching starships, the consequences for both characters would have been substantial. Kirk, aboard another ship, would likely have found himself in an even more isolated and rebellious position, perhaps delayed in his rise to leadership. Removed from the Enterprise, he may not have had the same opportunities to prove himself as a capable leader or develop the bond with Spock, which is crucial to both characters' arcs. The dynamics of the alternate crew might have shifted his growth trajectory, with Kirk possibly assuming a more maverick role. On the flip side, Uhura aboard the Enterprise could have seen her taking a more prominent role in steering the fate of the starship. Given her command abilities and clear-headedness, she may have taken on a greater leadership role, which would have offered audiences a more empowered portrayal of her character earlier on. Perhaps her relationship with Spock would have developed differently under these circumstances, but it's not hard to imagine Uhura becoming a key decision-maker in moments of crisis aboard the Enterprise, standing alongside Spock and McCoy as a pivotal figure. Such a switch could also have brought a fresh exploration of gender roles within the franchise. Kirk has traditionally been portrayed as the brash male hero archetype, with his impulsive actions often leading to victory through sheer force of will. Uhura, on the other hand, is depicted as intelligent and diplomatic, often working behind the scenes to keep the crew connected and informed. By swapping their roles and placing Uhura in a more proactive, decision-making position, Abrams' reboot could have subverted traditional gender dynamics, allowing for a more diverse representation of leadership on screen. While the idea of Kirk and Uhura swapping starships never made it to the final cut, it remains an intriguing what-if scenario for Star Trek fans to consider. The film's exploration of teamwork and destiny might have taken on a new dimension, with different themes emerging depending on how these characters' arcs played out. Would Kirk still have grown into the leader he was meant to be if removed from the Enterprise? Would Uhura have stepped into a command role that more fully utilized her talents as a leader and strategist? Ultimately, the version of Star Trek that audiences received in 2009 struck a balance between honoring the original series and bringing a fresh, modern take to the characters. Still, it's fascinating to consider how the film might have changed had Kirk and Uhura's fates been reversed. The idea speaks to the endless possibilities of the Star Trek universe and the ways in which small changes in direction can lead to vastly different outcomes. In the end, Abrams' decision to